This is Buffalo, What's Next? I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Brigid Jaipaul-Valenza.
And I'm Dave Debo. If ever there was an issue that demands more discussion now, the racist massacre at Tops Friendly Markets on May 14th is it.
You know, America has a long, deep, rich history of racism brutalizing black communities.
But where does it go from here? What does our community need?
We must work and teach our children.
What issues just aren't being addressed?
As long as we keep doing the same thing, we're just sitting ducks for the next mass shooting. That's all you can say.
This is a new program. Every weekday, we'll set aside this hour to hear from the community about issues that can no longer be held back.
We need to make a concerted effort in our nation, in our institutions, and yes, in our family.
And welcome to the program. This is Dave Debo. Later on, we will be joined by Brigid Jaipaul-Valenza and Jay Moran, bringing you a series of guests to discuss this important topic. We're glad to have this program on the air. It is an unapologetic discussion of the top shooting, what led to it, and really what to do about it afterwards. The name Buffalo Next, I think, summarizes so much of it all. Where does the community go from here? Over the next several days, weeks, really as long as it takes, we will bring in guests to discuss exactly that. What is next for the community? We would like to have you on board for this, by the way. If you have comments or questions that you'd like to get to us, you can do that right now through our app, the WBFO app. Just hit the Talk to Us button, and we'll be able to get your comments incorporated on air here as part of this discussion. I'd like to begin the program with a jump back to Sunday night, the day after the shooting. One night later, there was an interfaith service at the Macedonian Baptist Church on East North Street.
I want to be clear that while I am so glad that we are all here together, our goal today is not for another kumbaya moment. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. We need sustainable movement.
And then after that, speaker after speaker that night spoke of the action required. Some came up and talked about better education, some about the need for more anti-racism efforts, business investment, jail reform, better policing. And then to kind of sum it all up, the Reverend Julian Armand Cook came forth with some words that really might as well be the guiding premise for this program and all discussion after that.
Point to somebody and tell them where there is no truth, there can be no healing. If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truth. Point to somebody and tell them, tell the truth. Right, my grandmother say, shame the devil. You get rid of evil if you tell the truth. So it's uncomfortable, but these truths must be spoken. And growth is always uncomfortable.
And the Reverend Julian Armand Cook is with us for the discussion now. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
The remarks during that service really kind of got to me, framed, I think, a lot of the discussion. What, to your mind, is the number one most uncomfortable truth that has to be told here?
I think the most uncomfortable truth that has to be told here is that this is not happenstance. This is not a coincidence. This is not a tragedy in the sense of something that we could not control, but that human beings, that the way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops market and the conditions that existed in the community before.
And by that
market.
By that, you're saying basically systemic racism.
Systemic racism. Yes.
Is Buffalo in any way unique, or is the system nationwide?
Oh, this system is nationwide. I think Buffalo has a distinct way, as do all cities and all locations, has a distinct way in which it is represented here in our community. But it is present everywhere. As Reverend William Barber says very often, he said, the shooter has been apprehended, but the killer is still on the loose.
So what do we do? I've heard a lot of talk of anti-racism education. I've heard a lot of talk about just imaging the idea that hate has no home here.
Sure.
I'm almost about to say that that's the kumbaya moment you spoke of. That's the hollow words, no?
Those are the hollow words. That's the kumbaya moment. I think we have to start, as you played in those clips, by telling the truth, by being honest about our history, our collective history, and our various roles that we've played in that, right? And that can be very difficult to do because it often rubs against our mythology that we build around our exceptionalism, not just as America, but also as a community. And it can be difficult to tell those truths alongside the myths that we believe about ourselves.
Talk about the myths. What's myth number one?
Myth number one, this whole notion that we were created as a society where equity was central. Well, that's questionable.
For some, maybe.
For some, maybe. But then when you think about the importation, the stealing and the importation of African slaves, the forced labor, the sexual abuse, all of that is a part of our story, too. We need to tell those truths together.
And a part of our story today, because I can hear people already saying, maybe skeptics out there, Reverend, that was the 1700s.
That's right.
That has nothing to do with what happened at Tops today. Buck back against that for me.
Take a drive down Jefferson Street. That's the first thing I would say to you. I would invite you to go and live and sit in the heart of that community and try to explain to me why the moment you cross Main Street, the conditions of life change so starkly. That's where we need to start.
So do we need to treat, and in the way I'm asking the question, I'm almost giving you the answer, but rhetorically speaking, do we need to treat the symptoms, disinvestment along Jefferson, or do we need to somehow treat the broader problem, a lack of recognition of the role of racism currently in society?
I think we need to do both, quite honestly. I think we need to do both at the same time, right? There has to be some level of triage, or we're going to continue to experience these types of shootings. We're going to continue to experience the disinvestment in the community that we've seen, and Black people in our city are going to continue to suffer. But we also must do the comprehensive work necessary, right? The white nationalist rhetoric, the white supremacist rhetoric that is the bedrock of the attack that we saw has to be dealt with as well. So I think we can do both things at the same time if we follow a triage model.
Governor Hochul and other politicians have proposed a crackdown on some of the rhetoric that's pushed out via social media.
Sure.
Step number one, but probably not the only thing you have in mind.
Probably not. I think that's an important step. But I also think if we do that work while not addressing the issues, the history of redlining on the east side of Buffalo, if we don't confront the fact that this was the only grocery store for 2 miles and why that is the case, if we don't confront the fact that leaders in the community have consistently approached other food corporations about moving into that area and have consistently been told by those corporations that we don't want to come to the east side, until we deal with that also, we're really just sort of throwing crumbs.
Okay, so do we find a Black entrepreneur who will open a supermarket?
I think we do that. But I also know that the realities of this country are that there aren't that many. There are not enough Black food producers and corporations to really make the type of change that we need. This is going to take a comprehensive effort. It's going to take investment in Black entrepreneurs, but it's also going to take whites to release some control over these areas too.
Tell me more about that. When you say release control, what kind of things have to happen?
Well, I think we have to stop with the excuses, right? These notions that Black people, I know for several corporations, well, we don't know if we have the audience in the Black community. Well, that's not true. I know many congregants and folks in my community who drive miles to go to grocery stores where they can get better quality food. Part of the reality of this Tops location, right, was, yes, it was an epicenter of community. It was where a lot of my congregants went to pay their bills or get their prescriptions. But the quality of that Tops within itself was often problematic. It was not the best Tops in the city, because it can't be. Because if it's being used by that many people, there's a need to consistently push out food, and quality gets compromised in that process.
Right. Julian Armand Cook is here, Reverend Julian Armand Cook from Macedonia Baptist Church on East North Street. You guys started out on Jefferson, didn't you?
We did. We started out on Jefferson Avenue, yes.
How many people in your congregation lost people they knew?
Oh, I would say that this tragedy touched every member of my congregation. Somebody knew Officer Salters, who was the security guard there. So many people, Mother Young, these are Deacon Patterson. So many of my seniors had groceries delivered to them by Deacon Patterson. This touched every member of my congregation.
And I want to jump back to the idea you spoke of right at the top, that we need to speak about the evil of racism.
We do.
These people were targeted.
They were targeted, and they were easily targeted because of the segregation lines that exist in our city.
So let me go back to the premise. What do we do? If it's kind of a two-pronged problem, overall systemic racism, and then all the symptoms that come from that disease, let's not look at the symptoms. Let's look at that big one for a second. Mm-hmm. How do we get white folks to admit that they're racist or to acknowledge that there needs to be a change? Because I'm not entirely self-aware, but if you ask me, I'll say, no, I'm not racist, although I know that I have older relatives who have really old beliefs. I know that in a lot of ways there are things in me and in anyone that they are probably not aware of. So how do you get the conversation going? How do you get people to confront racism? Because I'm pretty sure, unless you're hanging in the same circles and writing the same things that the shooter did, if you ask a white person, are you racist? The answer is going to be, of course not.
That's right.
Dialogue would stop right then and there, wouldn't it?
It would. I think that we have to demystify what racism is, right? We have to be able to talk about what it means for us to participate in structural racism without having to be someone who goes out and enacts white supremacist violence. I think that's part of the problem with the way we even talk about racism in this country, right? When we talk about racism as the represent, and even in this instance with the Tops Market shooting, racism as something horrific happens, a gunman comes into a Tops Market and targets black people. That is certainly an extreme example of racism. But there are also the ways in which we consistently participate in the perpetuation of anti-black policies, of harm in communities, of not seeking the flourishing of black communities. That's what I want. That's what I want most white people to be able to talk about.
So the question should not be, are you, white person, racist? The question should be, what have you done lately?
That's right. What have you done lately? And what are you doing now? And what are you planning to do tomorrow?
And that brings us, I guess, to the symptoms part of it. What little things can be done? If we're successful at addressing the systemic stuff, the atmospheric stuff at the very top of the page, what are some of the recommendations underneath that you want to see for the community?
I, number one, want to see our white brothers and sisters help us. Those who want to say, like you said, I want to do something.
Sure.
I want them to help us to push for investment in this community.
And that's more than like the relief efforts that are underway now.
That's more than charity.
Right. I hear you.
That's more than charity. That's about having a reliable business that hires and employs black people from the community. We cannot deal with this issue until we deal with the fact that there is a stark wealth divide in our between Buffalo, west side of Buffalo, and North Buffalo and East Buffalo. So we have to be able to talk about that. We have to be able to deal with that. We need white people to partner with us to demand that there be another grocery store, more grocery options in this community. It is not, and I'm going to push back on those who say we live in a food desert. I've even used that terminology. It's problematic. We live in a food apartheid. Deserts are created naturally. This was structurally created, and we can do something about it.
There are bodegas.
That's right. There are bodegas. They're often more expensive.
Okay.
And they often don't provide the best quality.
All right. So what would it take for, theoretically, a Wegmans to come on in?
I think it would take a big push from the African-American community. I think it would take a push from our city government and state leaders. But I also think if the white community stepped up in Buffalo and said, we're going to work until we see another grocery store here. And we care about that because we care about grocery stores in our community. And what affects you affects us as well. That's when I think we'll see change.
And that's a business proposition that is supportable.
That's right. That's a business proposition that is absolutely supportable that we could begin working on tomorrow to change the lives of folks in Buffalo.
What else? I know your church is involved through Houghton College with education efforts in the community.
That's right.
A way to bring the college campus from Houghton to the inner city of Buffalo.
That's right.
That's not necessarily anti-racist, but that is certainly giving opportunity in an area where opportunity is needed.
And it's shifted. That's right. It's shifting the resources, right? If we've got the concentration of resources in one community and we've got lack in the other, what we have to do as a part of that shifting, right, as you talked about, we have to be able to reallocate resources so that they are spread about equitably. And that's what I think the Houghton College program does. It takes those resources, those wonderful, amazing academic resources that were offered in Allegheny County, where I was a student, and it says, if we want to see real change, we're going to have to prepare the next generation of leaders in this community. Let's shift those resources into the heart of the city.
What about education in general? You just spoke of secondary education.
Sure.
What about the schools? Is there a role here for Buffalo Public Schools? I know they have an entire curriculum based on making sure they are culturally sensitive. I know that they are trying, obviously, to educate all communities about the needs of all communities. Is there enough education in Buffalo Public Schools for your needs?
I don't think so. I think Buffalo Public Schools have not done the best job historically, and that's difficult for me to say as a child of public education. They've not done the best job, and I think a lot of that has to do with teachers who are exhausted. I think that has to do with the lack of resources and investment in the Buffalo Public Schools. Right. The reality is you cannot talk about the Buffalo Public Schools without talking about race and racism. We have a population in the Buffalo Public Schools that is primarily comprised of students of color. And then on top of that, you also have issues of poverty in the school system. So until we treat those things together and look at those things together and find a comprehensive plan, we won't be able to move very far on that.
Is that the role of schools, or should they just be educating the kids? Again, skeptics would say, You're calling on a really tall order there for a district that is financially strapped.
Yeah, I think we have to do it. Quite honestly, I'm a teacher myself. I know how difficult it is as a college professor to teach a student who has not had breakfast in the morning, or who doesn't know if when they go home they'll be evicted from their apartment. So if you want to change the quality of education, if you want to change the way in which students receive the material and are able to take that material and apply it to their life and increase their life outcomes, then we have to do something about those things together.
Real quickly, is lack of parental involvement a racist trope, or is that part of the equation?
Oh, I think it's a racist trope. Absolutely. I think there's even there are even statistics that show that African American male parents in particular spend more time with their children than any other race. So I think that's a trope. I think it's an excuse. I think it's a way that we turn personal responsibility back onto Black people. What we need to do is think about systems and structures.
All right. In the remaining moments here, are you optimistic? Are you hopeful?
I'm hopeful, but I'm less interested in finding hope and much more interested in being a hope. And I hope that there's some other folks who will join me in that.
And lastly, in the broadest sense you can articulate it, what does Buffalo need?
Buffalo needs to tell the truth, but Buffalo also needs to commit to doing the work necessary to being better, to living up to being the city of good neighbors. If that's who we claim to be, let's live up to it.
All right. Reverend Cook, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Reverend Julian Armand Cook is the Reverend and Pastor at Macedonia Baptist Church on East North Street. You heard him earlier in the program mention that they started out on Jefferson Avenue, and there's immense connections to the community there. This is a conversation that will continue. We'll have you back, I promise.
I look forward to it.
And it also continues in just a moment. We're looking today at a lot of different aspects of this discussion. Coming up next, Brigid Jaipaul-Valenza with DeJon Hall, and later in the program, Jay Moran with Richard Cummings. We'll be right back.
Get all the trusted local news you need right to your inbox each weekday morning with the WBFO Daily Email. Visit WBFO.org to sign up today.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@WBFO.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
Hello, you're listening to Buffalo What's Next? Thank you for joining us. I'm host Brigid Jaipaul-Valenza. We're joined today by DeJon Hall, community advocate. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all for having me.
First off, how are you doing?
Interesting question. I'm surviving, and I think that that is enough for now.
Is it really enough for now for the people who live in the communities that are affected by?
Well, as someone who lost a family member in the tragic incident that took place on that Saturday, for me, it is enough. I think there are a lot of people who are ready for action, and by all means, they should move forward for that. But some of us who have been doing this work for a very long time might be a little fatigued by this. And so surviving is enough so long as we don't remain in ruin. Some would say don't rest in the ruin, and I'm not going to. I just need a pause.
Absolutely. I mean, it is heartbreaking, but it also makes you angry.
Very much so. And I think that anger has been permeating throughout the community for a very long time, even prior to this incident, because the build-up to this moment has been long and slow.
So what do you think brought us here?
So if folks have read the manifesto of the shooter, then they would know that this guy chose Buffalo, and particularly that tops, because of the 14208 zip code. That being that it had the highest concentration of black folks closest to where he lived outside of New York City. And that's important because you don't get that high level of concentration without a buildup of policies and laws that make it so that a city like Buffalo could be the sixth most segregated city in the nation. I mean, there's a host of reasons why that is. You know, we could talk about redlining and restrictive covenants. We could talk about over-policing. We can talk about food apartheid. There's just a long and slow, deliberate move to, I guess, suppress, in some ways, the black population in this city and this county.
So would we be safe in saying that Buffalo is a segregated city?
Absolutely. I mean, data has shown this. We are the sixth most segregated city, according to one study, third poorest city. And when you combine that high concentration of poverty with our current segregation, it's hard to see a way in which that can change unless resources begin to shift towards those populations who have been confined to particular areas.
So we're talking about redlining. We're talking about keeping a particular population, say, ensconced or encased in a designated area.
That's right.
So beyond why that happened, how does one fix that?
Well, very good question. And I think about Ta-Nehisi Coates and his case for reparations, which was written some years ago, I want to say around 2016, 17. I think that lays out how we got to this moment very clearly. The stuff that you read in that article happened here in Buffalo. I mean, it's no surprise, to me at least, as a black Buffalonian, that 85% of the black population resides on the east side. It's no surprise that when I was born, the average income for black Americans was $39,000, and here we are 32 years later, and it's only increased by $3,000. It's no surprise that black unemployment remains in the double digits, just as it was 32 years ago when I was born. And it's no surprise that, you know, when we look at 51 census tracts that say that there's no grocery store that's accessible to them, all 51 of those census tracts reside in the east side. That is our reality, but it doesn't have to be. right? The laws that led to this moment, whether it be the Federal Highways Act, the way that the FHA or Federal Housing Act was implemented and how that affected us, can be undone with, I think, a deliberate process of truth, reconciliation, and reparation. That is our pathway forward. I think I heard Reverend Cook say that, we need to tell the truth and shame the devil. And I think that that is what this moment demands of us. We cannot continue to let ourselves rest in this area of complacency. I would submit that normalcy in America is pretty much akin to a type of peace that Dr. King actually rejected. In one of his speeches, he described that type of peace as being boiled down to stagnant complacency with deadening passivity. That is what we have lived in, but that is not where we need to go moving forward.
So you talked a little bit about food apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
In the wake of this tragedy, there was and is currently a huge step up in the community to bring food in and have mental health resources for those who are there. In a recent tweet, you did say free food and mental health counseling is not a response to white supremacy.
No.
Explain that.
Well, because I think for far too long, we've looked at white supremacy from the lens of overt acts of racism, right? We view it as if the white robes of Klansmen are the face of white supremacy. In today's times, that is not the case. It simply isn't. When we picture white supremacy, I would submit we should be picturing things like the Blue Lives Matter flag. We should be picturing things like Evans Bank logo or Bank of America logos, because the way that they've systematically redlined or gave out predatory lending contributes to white supremacy today. We should be looking at, why it is that Wegmans or Whole Foods only puts grocery stores in specific zip codes, knowing fully well the economic bleed that term basically means the deliberate and slow drain of resources from particular zip codes, knowing that that is what has happened to zip codes like 142111, 14215, 14208, is what led to this moment. And also simultaneously the rationale as to why Wegmans refuses to put a grocery store in those zip codes, because they don't earn enough, because there isn't high enough density. If we don't begin to look at it as a systemic issue, with benevolent folks being the everyday perpetrators of white supremacy, then we will completely miss the point and remain in this place where truth goes unspoken.
So let's talk about the everyday folk.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people out there who call themselves allies.
Mm-hmm.
They are allies, and every person needs an ally. So what do you say to our allies then? What do they need to do in order to be able to assist in changing things?
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference, I think, in being an ally versus trying to be a hero. And that needs to be lifted up. I mean, there is a notion that if I am standing up to white supremacy by marching in the streets, by speaking out on, media, then I am doing the work of an ally. And a lot of times, some of those folks are not actually doing the deeper work. They're not at their kitchen table calling out their loved ones, because that would mean confronting those closest to you. They're not doing the reading, they're not looking at your, James Baldwin, your Malcolm X, your Dr. King, and thinking those, and being critical about how they engage those works. And they're also taking up sometimes a lot of space that should go to Black and brown voices who are on the ground every day living that reality and have an idea of what needs to be done. I'm a firm believer that the greatest solutions to our issues come from those who are most deeply impacted. So
the Thanksgiving table is it for you?
It is one part of it. Also stepping up and stepping back. It's knowing when to show up and when to step back.
You talk a lot also about leadership and what people in power can do. Biden was here. President Biden was here. And you were a bit critical of his visit. Why is that?
Well, two reasons, right? So this is not the first summer in which my family has had to mourn. Last summer we lost a 4-year-old cousin to gun violence in the Ferry Projects. And then this summer we lost my uncle through marriage, Deacon Hayward Patterson. In both times...
I'm so sorry.
In both times, the way that folks in positions of respectability and power have responded have been, calls for love, unity, and some form of addressing gun violence. Gun violence, to me, seems to be much more of a symptom than a cause. And for far too long, I would say that we've been branding gun violence as the cause. It's not the cause alone. Having a gun or access to a gun is not what led this shooter to pick the 14208 zip code. It only gave him the means to carry out what he had meticulously planned. Now, Biden, he imagines this country that I'm sorry to say, I don't think it exists. It would be easy and convenient for us to fall back into the myth of American exceptionalism. But the fact of the matter is, since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed, and it has not skipped a day. There's never been a day in American history where racial violence has not existed. And I say that with the understanding that violence isn't limited to, fighting or to shooting. Violence takes various forms. It could be mental. We recognize that in domestic violence or intimate partner violence. It can be spiritual. We recognize that in the way that Christianity was used during slave times. And it could be economic. Right? That's what redlining is. That is what food apartheid is. And until we recognize violence to be that expansive, we will continuously rob ourselves of the truth. And that is that America, since its beginning, has carried out racial violence. And until our presidents, our mayors, our state senators, our U.S. senators, our House of Reps, our state reps begin to speak along those lines and call for real truth and reconciliation processes that come with some form of redress, we will remain in this moment.
We are speaking with DeJon Hall, community advocate, about recent events. What does that look like? What does reparations, what do reparations look like?
Well, I think we first should back up and talk about what truth and reconciliation looks like before we even get to a place of what reparations look like. And, South Africa is an example of what a truth commission can look like. And that is pulling people from every facet of society to talk about the horrors of what has taken place in any particular country. In America, that means talking about not just slavery, but its legacy, talking about Jim Crow, talking about modern tactics, including mass incarceration, including the school-to-prison pipeline, and including things like redlining and restrictive covenants and predatory lending and student loan debt. Until we can do that, in combination with, why it is major corporations choose the suburbs for their headquarters, or why they choose specific zip codes to put, the healthiest options for food, or address environmental racism. We have to come up with a commission, a court-like proceeding where those things are talked about openly and explored. And then we can begin to talk about what reparations can look like, because reparations can take various forms. The most obvious, folks talk about direct checks, but there are other things. There are, aid for purchasing homes, fixing credit. There's debt relief. There's so many different ways and forms reparations can take place. And I think that those ideas should be explored only once we have the data, once we have the truth and reconciliation process set before legislators so they can make an appropriate decision.
Do you think that our elected leaders right now are ready for that conversation?
Absolutely not. I mean, when you look at, first off, we have to be honest about how our elected leaders get chosen, right? They're chosen through, of course, popular vote in any particular subdivision of, the city. In this case, I'm thinking about Common Council. I'm thinking about districts. I'll just lift up Fillmore, for example. It's shaped like a U for a reason, right? It has been gerrymandered. And most of our districts have been gerrymandered for specific reasons, either to keep someone in power or to keep someone from gaining power. And that is another form of how white supremacy remains intact. And so when our leaders are chosen through mechanisms meant to keep that same ideology that's been passed down through generations in power, we cannot honestly rely on them in their good faith to address the issue. So no, I don't really have faith in our leaders because they're not leading. I mean, they're the ones that have drawn the maps. They're the ones that keep themselves in power. I'll stop there. I will say this, though, of truth. Truth confrontation can be a difficult thing. And, one of my intellectual mentors, someone who I read often, James Baldwin, says, those who never suffer may never grow. And until we get to a place where we suffer through exploring the truth, we'll never grow.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask then the obligatory question, what's next?
Well, I think if enough of us call for that sort of truth and reconciliation process, something formalized, then we can begin the next steps of imagining what this nation was meant to be. Our founders called, this a place where folks, have equal rights or endowed with inalienable rights. But until we talk through those things, until we imagine, what it means to support Black people, what it means to support Asian populations, what it means to support Latinx folks, we will never live up to that moral debt. We will never pay our moral debts, and we will never be the America that we were meant to be. But we can do that by standing together, talking to one another, not past one another, being honest about our positions, and working toward an equitable, diverse, and inclusive country.
There's hope, then.
There is always hope. Probability is one thing, but possibility is another, and the possibility certainly exists. Right now, I think the probability is low, but it can go higher as we begin to take those steps.
DeJon, thank you so much for joining us in our show today, our inaugural show today. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
And we certainly hope to have you back on again.
I'll be honored. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Coming up is Jay Moran. You are listening to Buffalo What's Next.
Watch, listen, engage, play, and learn with Buffalo Toronto public media stations and our weekly newsletter, The List. Sign up to receive the email at WNED.org and find out the best shows to watch, the great music to listen to, the important news you can't miss, and the many ways you can engage with our public media family. Sign up now at WNED.org.
Stream the best from Buffalo Toronto Public Media's YouTube channel. If Our Water Could Talk, Erie County Fair, 2 Frederick Law Olmsted documentaries, and so much more to watch. The very best of WNED PBS, now available on YouTube.
You're listening to Buffalo What's Next. There are several ways for you to join the conversation. Send us a message now on Twitter at WBFO. Email us at news@wbfo.org, or just press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app and leave a comment we can use on the air. We're here for you. This is Buffalo What's Next.
The shootings at the Tops Market on Jefferson Avenue, of course, has disrupted business activity, to say the least, on the east side of Buffalo. Here to talk a little bit more about how things are right now and what we could be doing moving forward, Richard Cummings, the treasurer of the Black Chamber of Commerce of Western New York and also with American Rated Cable and Communications. Richard, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for the invite.
Before we talk about solutions and things like that moving forward, let's just talk about the Black Chamber of Commerce for us just a little bit. What's the mission?
Well, our mission is to help black businesses gain more contract opportunity and profitability. We concentrate on the businesses in the Western New York area, and that's our number one mission. Also to promote circulating the black dollar in our community, with community residents spending their money for businesses in our community, and also black businesses doing businesses with each other.
I know this has a somewhat obvious answer, but at the same time, it's the question that needs to be asked. Do East Side businesses face specific obstacles?
Oh, yes, there are plenty of obstacles. What I could see could be a positive solution is that bigger companies in this area mentor smaller companies and help them get through their hurdles of day-to-day challenges in business, and also provide contract opportunities. It's good that you want to give money to the community, but also help the community earn money. And that will be a more positive and more economic uplift for black businesses in the community.
I know technology has been an issue, especially for the east side of Buffalo, and I would assume that would be an issue for businesses as well. Has there been any improvement on that front when it comes to things like access to Internet and things like that?
There has been some progress in it. I'm not keeping in tune with how much progress we've gotten over the years, but there has been, groups working on that problem, the city working on that problem.
But for you and your business specifically, it's not a huge issue.
No. Most, nowadays, everybody, especially if you're already in business, it's a no-brainer that you have to be involved with the internet.
Now,
but there are, some businesses that still need support in those areas. But there's, I think there's bigger problems than just that.
What about just for you, your life and business, your company, American Rated Cable and Communications? What about trying to gather more business? I mean, do you face racism? Do you face racism when you're trying to reach out for business opportunities?
Well, we've been in business for a number of years, and there is racism, institutional racism in Buffalo, and it has existed for years. But we have been successful in getting business and growing. We're union electrical contractors, and what we did was, we got our good start back when there was the $1 billion school project in Buffalo that had mandatory participation of minority companies. So based on that project, we joined the union. We were the first African-American company to sign all 3 agreements with Local 41 at that time. But we had the help of a major company that helped us in a mentorship relationship to get through the hurdles of being able to work on a construction project of that magnitude. So I would encourage other big businesses. You have businesses that are now throwing money at the east side, but from a business perspective, spend money with up-and-coming contractors and service entities and help them learn how to make money, help them get through the hurdles that are out there on why they can't be million-dollar businesses.
So that sounds like an opportunity and actually a real solid solution. Like you said, getting the bigger businesses to help and guide along some of these smaller businesses. Because it sounded like for you, when it came to the school project, if you didn't have somebody kind of guiding you through and I'm sure it's a very complicated process when it comes to accessing public money. If you didn't have that, you may not have succeeded.
Right, and we wouldn't have been able to participate. The dream of that project was to see some black success come out of it. There was I would say very little overall black success, but some companies did get a good start, in which we were one of them, out of that 10-year project. But there needs to be more incentives, and especially from private sector and the government from all levels, of trying to help businesses in our community that want to be in the big game but need help getting into the big game so that they can be successful and feed their families and help the economy of the East Side go up. So it would be a win-win situation because everybody would win. And what has to happen is, your major companies, and I know a lot of them realize this, but they have to share their pie.
Richard, as I hear you talking and making, I think, a real solid plea about this, because I think a lot of people right now are looking for how to move forward, how to come up with solutions. So it looks like you're reaching out here. And we can most certainly repeat this before we say goodbye here in another 10 minutes. But if somebody wanted to find out, if there's a big business out there that thinks that they have some expertise that they could help smaller businesses with, how do they get a hold of the Black Chamber of Commerce?
Oh, the Black Chamber of Commerce. You can contact us online. We have a Facebook. And why am I drawing a blank? It's WNY Black Chamber.
We can repeat. We can repeat that. But again, go on Facebook and you can do that search for WNY Black Chamber and find out more as well, and perhaps message Richard with that. Go ahead.
To me, what's more important, whatever business you're in, you find out who are the top major companies in that business. And then you approach them, especially if they deal with government contracts that require minority participation. You approach them for the relationship. And they are in a position, because they have to work with minority and women-owned contractors, they're in a position to help you get through some of the hurdles. For example, just one hurdle is on a construction project, you have to pay your people every week. But you don't start getting paid from the project at a minimum 30 days, if you're lucky. So your major companies can help the small companies meet their payroll until they start to get the money flowing from the contract. So, and a lot of companies, if they don't have someone to be in that position, they can't get the contract. So, and that's just one example of how your major companies can help the smaller minority companies.
And it sounds like what you need there is some sort of line of credit. How are banks when it comes to that type of thing?
But still, line of credit and all of that costs you money. Interest, having to pay interest on something costs you money. That takes away from the profit that you try to get on the project. So the more things you have to borrow and get credit on, that takes away from your profit, because you have to pay for that.
Right. It does sound like you're making a good case here for minority and women-owned businesses to reach out to other businesses for this mentoring opportunity here. But also,
and it can go the other way. The major companies, if they're serious about trying to help the black community and black businesses, they can approach the black businesses.
What about when it comes to these government contracts? We don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but can you give us an understanding of what you have to go through to secure one of these contracts?
Well, first you have to get certified. You have to get certified with the county, city, or the state of New York. Both entities have 30% goals on participation on contracts and on services. So your first step is to get certified. And on contracts that they require minority 30% goal, the companies, the prime companies that win these, have to sub out to minorities and women contractors to meet those goals. And in a lot of the trades, there are very, the number of minority businesses aren't there, but there are some there. But in order for them to play the game, they could use the assistance of the prime, who knows, the ins and outs, and can help whatever the shortfalls of the minority company. They can help them get over those. So, if they're serious about helping this community, help this community make money, help our youth learn skills that pay them to be paid, not minimum wages, decent salaries, so they can give back to the communities, give back to the tax base, and everybody prospers.
When it comes to good wages, those union jobs most certainly fall under that, don't they? You talked about how your company uses union employees. Just curious, how successful has the union been in terms of recruiting minorities to take some of those jobs?
Well, they've made efforts over the years. I've seen the members of minorities increase. It can always be better. But also, folks have to be able to want it and strive for it. The unions, and this is all of the unions, they can only allow so much folks in apprenticeship programs every year, and that's dictated by New York State. So there's only so many seats for minorities and women when it comes to setting up these apprenticeship classes every year. And the struggle is to try to get as many of minority and women into these courses so that you build up the locals with minority and women. And that's been trying to be improved over the past 10 years at least.
Yeah, most certainly I've heard about that. And to that point, then, just to follow up, though, are we seeing an interest in the black community for these types of jobs? Because like you said, we've had more than one story about the recruitment or the attempts to recruit and get people into these types of trades.
Yes, the one exciting thing that has happened over the past recent years is the Northland Training Center. And that's giving youth that necessarily you're not going, you can come straight out of high school and learn some electronic skills that will get you gainfully paid. So I'm highly impressed with that program. But there needs to be more of it and more involved, not just in the electronic field, but other fields that interest the youth, and that they can get the training to be successful in life, and from that they may want to become business people. You start out learning the basics, and then you as you get good in your field, you may want to become a business person in it, and it goes on and goes on. So
you're listening.
There's a lot of I've been back in Buffalo since 1990, and I've seen a lot of progress since then, but we still got a ways to go. And we just, now that, our community is on focus, everybody needs to step up and do, instead of talking, put your money where your mouth is and help the community come up. And again, folks want to earn the money. They're not looking for a handout. They're looking for opportunities to make money and have decent jobs.
This is Buffalo What's Next?
That will be the fix for this community moving forward. It's not a short fix, it's a long-term fix. So
you're listening to Buffalo What's Next, and we're talking with Richard Cummings. He's the treasurer of the Black Chamber of Commerce of Western New York. And I found an interview, actually, it was your father who was involved with the Black Chamber of Commerce of Western New York. Yeah. And
father's the president.
Right, he's the president, and it's interesting. He talked about how the chamber approaches things, and one of the things that they have to do is act as a watchdog to a certain extent, right? When it comes to these government projects that are supposed to have a certain amount of minority owned or women owned businesses involved in these contracts, is that something that still needs to be monitored?
Of course, yes, because the government isn't perfect. They are, even though they have the laws, they still are flawed. There are flaws in their process. We serve on advisory boards to the city and to the county on minority participation. And there are still instances where prime contractors are trying to cheat the system when it comes to meeting the goals. So you definitely need, on all sides, you need improvement in participation, and you need improvement in policing the process.
Richard, just wanted to maybe move on just for a moment here. Another element about the Black Chamber of Commerce has come out with as well, and this is maybe more historical, but in favor of covering the Kensington. That's, again, one of these projects. It's a big project. We've heard some talk about it. Is that still the case? I mean, do you see that as being a major improvement of prospects for the East Side?
Yes, I do. I happen to serve on ROC, which is Restoring Our Community Coalition, and this project will help boost the value of the community. It will help correct wrongs that were started in the 50s when it was first being built. And this project will create over 900 jobs. It will create businesses, and it will create the value of that community going up. So we worked on this project for 12 years, and we finally got the finances to get it done, and it's time to get it done. But that's just one, it's a little bit over $1 billion that we have. That's just one pocket of $1 billion that's going to help the community. There needs to be more projects worth $1 billion going down on the East Side to bring the East Side back to its value before the expressway was built. This project, and I encourage anybody to go to the rocbuffalo.org website and read the study that UB did. And the short of it is, no matter what this project costs, over time it will pay back itself in tax revenues and creating businesses. And creating employment. So no matter what the project costs, over time it will pay for itself. So, and so with that concept, some people want to claim why you want to throw over $1 billion into the East Side, and there's not, and the question, the answer is there should be more than just $1 billion thrown on the East Side. It should be billions. To bring back the community, because the value of the community was stolen purposely when that expressway was built. So.
And one final question. We're down to less than a minute to go here, Richard, but this is off of business, but just the shooting at Tops, what stands out for you in the aftermath?
Oh, goodness. The aftermath, and along with this shooting that we just had in Texas, the aftermath is that I'm a veteran. There is no way in the world civilians should have access to assault rifles. There's no way in the world someone that's not 21 years old should be able to purchase a weapon in this country. So until that is seriously addressed, we're going to continue to have multiple deaths because there's too many weapons out there in this country.
Richard Cummings, thank you very much for spending time with us today.
All right, thank you for having me participate.
Richard Cummings with the Black Chamber of Commerce, 716-995-0622, or go to 836 East Delavan. This will do it for today's show. Buffalo, what's next? We want to thank all of today's guests, as a matter of fact, for their time. Thank you very much for that and your insight. Reverend Julian Armand Cook, DeJon Hall, and, of course, Richard Cummings, who we just talked to right there. We want to hear from you. You can use the Talk to Us feature on WBFO and leave us a message, or send comments and questions via Twitter or email. We'll be back again tomorrow. That's the promise that we have for you here at WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown. We're Western New York's NPR station.